Good morning. Let's join together in this responsive reading, and I'll lead. For the beauty of the earth, the spinning blue-green ball, yes.
We walk gently across your path.
To come together again in this place to remember how we can live.
To remember who we are, to create how we will be.
Gaia, our home, the lap in which we live. Good morning. My name is Aaron Smith, and I've been asked to share a little bit about my story today. I grew up in Grand Rapids, spent most of my life here, and today I'll start by talking about my mother, since it is Mother's Day. My mother taught me at a very, very early age, along with my father, that if I wanted to go to heaven, I needed to invite Jesus into my heart, and then I would get to go there when I died. That was a very simple way it was explained to me as a child. And so when I was 8, when my father died, I prayed that prayer because I figured I need this power in my life because my father is no longer with me. And so that's how my spiritual journey began, having given my life over to Jesus, as they say in the Christian church. I grew up here in West Michigan in the Christian Reformed community. So in high school, I memorized the Heidelberg Catechism, which some of you may be familiar with. It's a bunch of questions and answers, and it's a way to articulate the Reformed faith. And you could open the book to any place and ask any of these questions, and I could rattle off an answer. And it was interesting, and it was fun to learn, but it didn't really connect with my heart, and I can't remember any of it anymore. So that's how that worked. There was also this thing in my life where I've got Jesus in my heart, but I still struggle with doing the wrong thing. Or is something I'm doing really wrong or not? Or is it because someone has decided it's wrong in this religious context that I'm in? And other people say they believe this way, but then they do this. These are the questions that we all have, right? So I ended up going to Calvin College, like a good CRC boy. But Calvin is a sort of interesting place because it's also a liberal arts school. So you don't just pick a major and study and then go off and do what you want. You're asked to think about everything, to question everything. Because when you study philosophy is just one question after another about every single iota of existence, right? What is the meaning of life? What is religion? Who is God? What is God? These are the questions. So the more you go and the deeper you dig, the more questions you have. The more questions I had coming out of that college experience. So after I graduated from college, I heard about this new church, and I had completely given up church at this point. But my dad couldn't stop talking about it, and my stepdad never got excited about church ever. It was just a thing we had to do on Sunday, but he was like fired up about this. And this church was called Mars Hill Bible Church, which I'm sure you've all heard of. And there was a man there named Rob Bell, who I'm sure you've all heard of as well. And he was stirring things up. And the way that he talked about faith, the way that he talked about God, the way he talked about religion, the way he talked about the Bible, which he loved quite a bit, and I think still loves to this day, it resonated with all of my questions. And so I went there for like 8 years, and in those 8 years I realized, like, oh my word, he's reaching this conclusion, and I'm reaching it with him, that this isn't the only way to know about God, to know about heaven, to know about hell. And at a certain point in the journey, in one of his books, he wrote about hell, and he wrote about heaven as not being this place you end up if you do the right or the wrong thing, but these are states of being. These are places that you enter into in periods of your life so that there's refinement. And I can tell you that I've been in hell. I know what that's like. I went through a divorce, a marriage that ended because I was unfaithful. That was hell. I don't ever want to go there again. And then I met the woman I'm married to now, Naomi. And she is heaven. And conceiving a child with her, that was heaven. And seeing him come into the world, that was heaven. And I wouldn't have that heaven with my family now if I hadn't had that other hell, because I learned so much from that hell. So here at Fountain Street, what I have learned is that everyone is welcome, and you might be in hell today, and you might be in heaven today. You're welcome here. Come on in. Because what we have for you here is grace and love and mercy. You belong here, and you are here. Welcome to Fountain Street. Thank you.
It is a practice here at Fountain Street on Mother's Day to participate in child and family dedications, a simple yet profound ritual of blessing and of promise. So hear these words on children by Khalil Gibran. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which we cannot visit, not even in our dreams. And so at this time, we call forward the Kilpatrick family to celebrate a service of dedication. Children widen the circle of our being in ways that are limitless. Every child that comes into this world connects us to our history, known and unknown forebears who brought new life to the world in each generation. Every child links us to the future, to a world yet to come that belongs to our descendants and that we hold in trust. We will become their ancestors. Each child connects us to nature, to the innocence and exuberance of a world always in motion, always recreating. And each child reminds us of the kinship we share with people across the planet who also tend to their young. And each child connects us to the universe, to the holy mysteries of living and becoming from which we all emerge. And lest we forget that we were also children. And so children widen the circle of our being in ways that are limitless.
A child is a most precious gift. Through your children, you will be called into something known as the hero's journey. Your children will be for you a mirror which has revealed both the depth of your darkness and the brightness of your light. With them, you will be called to experience both joy and sorrow, laughter and tears, the challenge of giving and receiving, the power of hope and despair, In other words, all of life. And so I ask you who gather around this one, do you welcome these children just as you are? Do you promise to love, honor, care, and teach him as best you are able, encouraging him to discover his unique way in faith? And do you promise to walk with him as he explores the questions that make for a truly meaningful and valuable life? These questions like, who am I? Why am I here? And how shall I be most truly helpful? If so, please say together as a family, I do.
I do. So by what name, Amber and Ryan, will this child be called?
Benjamin North.
Benjamin North. We bless you with water. A reminder that we all come from the waters of life. A symbol of the spirit that flows within, beyond, and between us all. We bless you with faith, hope, love, and joy, that your eyes may see brightly, that your ears may hear clearly, that your mouth may speak kindness, and that your spirit may shine forth unto a world in great need. Amen. And I have a question for you, Henry. Do you promise to try to be the most loving big brother you can be?
Yes.
Families gathered here, and to this family who gathers around the newest of our community named and known, we offer you a rose today. We've removed the thorns from this one stem, but we will and cannot remove the thorns from the life you shall share together. Our prayer today is that though life will have its thorns, this community offers you, by its presence and comfort, its challenge and inspiration, a desire to add to, but to help you move through and with whatever struggle and pain may indeed come your way, and to celebrate with you and your children all the joy and blessings of life together.
And at this time, will the congregation please rise as you're able and offer your promise to this family? Do you welcome this child and this family into the life and work and play of Fountain Street Church? Do you promise to love, honor, and teach and care for them as best you are able, supporting and encouraging them this day and all days of your life? If so, please say, we do.
We do.
And having heard these promises and offered these blessings, we offer this one upon us, one and all. May the blessing of the Spirit hold you and keep you. May the divine of your understanding be present with you always. And may the love that grows in the heart of this people for you and all our children each and every day invite you to life and life abundant, the great work of shalom for all people. Amen.
I have two readings to share this morning as our common text for reflection. The first is in that genre of ancient text of Jewish writing from the Apocrypha of the Hebrew Scriptures in the Bible. It is a book that is often included when talking about the literature that speaks in length about Sophia, wisdom, about the divine feminine. And this is from the book of Ben Sirach, or the Wisdom of Sirach. The sand of the sea, the drops of rain, and the days of eternity, who can count them? The height of heaven, the breadth of earth, the abyss, and wisdom, who can search them out? Wisdom was created before all other things. The root of wisdom, to whom has it been revealed? Her subtleties, who knows them? Wisdom teaches her children. Whoever loves her loves life, and those who seek her from early morning are filled with joy. The second reading would fall into the genre, I think, of contemporary testimony, despite being written some 145 years ago. It is by Julia Ward Howe. You can find it in the back of your hymnals in the pew. She was a Unitarian, often sitting in the pews at Channing Memorial Church in Newport, Rhode Island. She's known, you may know, as being the composer of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, which she wrote at the start of the Civil War. After the Civil War in 1870, she wrote this, an appeal to womanhood throughout the world, which has a distinct sentiment from the Battle Hymn. Julia Ward Howe spent some of her life in Rhode Island, where I had previously lived, and so it was during my time there that I had learned of that local connection and would get in the habit of rereading the appeal, which is commonly referred to as the Mother's Day Proclamation. And there's such a fascinating history of the origins of what is now Mother's Day, including the story of a woman named Anne Reeves Jarvis, someone whose efforts she worked to improve infant mortality rates. She was part of groups that tended to wounded soldiers, and after the war would bring together women on both sides for mothers' friendship picnics. And so it was also in this spirit that Julia Ward Howe wrote these words. Arise then, women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts, whether your baptism be that of water or of tears. Say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We, women of one country, will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure theirs. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence vindicate possession. Let women now leave all that they may be left of home for a great and earnest day of counsel. Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead. Let them solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, man as the brother of man, each bearing after his own kind the sacred imprints, not of Caesar, but of God. So I have a story, a little teaching, and then an invitation. It was late spring, days not unlike the ones that we've been having. It was both a spirit-filled and very stressful time of year for the high school seniors that were preparing to finish up their final term and preparing to launch into their next chapter of young adulthood. So I was not surprised when a student came running literally into my office one morning with a very concerned look on his face. He exclaimed that he just couldn't write his final paper anymore. Let me provide background. It was one of my first years teaching nearly 14 years ago. I was an intern in the chaplain's office at a residential school nestled in the hills of New England. And I'd been assigned to co-teach and cover a section of the violence and nonviolence course in the religious studies department. I pulled up the course syllabus this week after reading Julia Ward-Howe's proclamation of peace once again. It was a syllabus that had been well developed over a long career of teaching by a wise woman named Ginny Brooks, and it examined the nature and prevalence of violence in our personal lives and in society at large. We considered things like the spiral of violence, the cycles of oppression, all the varied forms of violence in our world, from personal, overt acts to covert, institutionalized violence. And we also explored the diversity of ways that we might respond. And so for their final project, students had to choose either one of about at least 24 problems of violence that we had listed on the list, plus subheadings underneath those, or a person who found themselves responding to one of those challenges with an alternative of some sort. As I read through the list of those 24 manifestations of violence, there were few, if any, I hadn't either read or heard about in the past week. So back to that student who burst into my office. He said it just wouldn't be possible. He was not going to be able to write his final paper. His topic? Well, his topic was soccer hooligans. He'd been exploring the competition between fans and stadium violence in various locations across the world, and he, too, was on the soccer team at his school. Ms. Barnum, I can't write a paper on this. I am a soccer hooligan. He said, I'm a hypocrite. Those were his words. He had nearly broken a team member's nose during soccer practice the preceding day, and he told me it was not by accident. He did end up writing the paper of his own free will. The team member's nose healed, and some reconciliation via an apology and future good sportsmanship on the team led to no further incidents. So while this is an example of an ultimately transformative aha moment we hope that someone has on the learning journey, I can't pretend that throughout many weeks of that course that we came up with easy answers to respond to the problem of violence in our world. But I can say that learning about the stories of many individuals who sought to respond to violence in their communities, of course, was inspiring and humbling, and gave us some maps, some methods in our own lives, many of which are still seeking so much more manifestation in our world. Now, for those who selected a person for their final project, we studied a lot about King and Gandhi, of course, but there were about 40 names on that list of women and men who were working in their communities in the recent past and present. So for those who selected a person As they learned about the strategies and assessed their effectiveness, they were also encouraged to comment on what they noted about the character and the worldview of the individual. And when we speak of the individuals committed to transforming communities in response to violence, we hear words like acts of love and protest and resistance, justice, compassion, and wisdom. It begs the question, how do we teach not only our children and youth, but ourselves about character and wisdom in a world plagued with violence? I've long been of the mindset that wisdom isn't something you can get tested on, right? It's not really something you can measure. But we tend to recognize it when we hear it, and if we don't initially recognize, it gets our big mind thinking a lot more than our chatty heads. One of the coolest things I think about wisdom is that it can really appear regardless of what we might call intellectual capacity, right? Wisdom isn't about being smart. Sometimes it can be. But we know that even if one has a lot of knowledge, without wisdom, knowledge can do great harm. We're cultured to be consumers of information, among many other things. Consume, consume, consume. The hard work, right, is distilling the voice of wisdom in all the noise. And of course, no one teacher has the market on wisdom. No one religious tradition has the market on wisdom, nor on violence for that matter. So how do we become seekers and bearers of wisdom? And what do I really mean when I say wisdom? So this is where the teaching on that particular kind of wisdom we've been focusing on today is of value. Yes, wisdom, it's a big word. It's a virtue. But today I mean the kind of wisdom that has that capital W. And today is as good a day as any to think about, even invoke the teachings of that Sophia wisdom, lady wisdom, divine wisdom. While no gender alone can claim wisdom as its own, there is a long history in wisdom traditions of wisdom being described and personified as feminine. The words used for the divine feminine across the world's religions and spiritual traditions, of course, are many, from Gaia, Mother Earth, Tree of Life, Shekinah, Queen of Heaven, to Sophia. The way I see it, wisdom is an equal opportunity employer. Regardless of your gender identity or expression or how you conform or don't conform to ideas of gender, we have access to it, and no matter our age. In the same way that we all have access to what is sometimes called maternal thinking, the capacity for mothering and being mothered. And the reason why I share that snapshot of the student reflecting on his own capacity to be a soccer hooligan is that I think it's an example of what is so often the first step in gaining insight to the bigger problems that we face. There was this initial turning away from that reality that he knew, and then he chose to turn towards it. It may seem obvious hearing it, but the fact that it wasn't obvious to him is what's so fascinating about us humans. When it comes to considering the devastating problems of violence in our world and discerning a wise response, inquiry into our own lived experience feels like as good a place as any to start. For some, it may be acknowledging the emotion of anger in response to injustice and finding a way to use that as will towards the good. For some, it may be protest or resistance or nonviolence. For some, it may be the hard work of healing the trauma of violence that one has experienced or inflicted. St. Augustine wrote that hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not need to remain the way they are. And so when I learn about the stories of women like Julia Ward Howe, I do hear a voice of feminine wisdom, an example of what some ethicists would call a maternal peace politics. And the words from that reading I read earlier that I hear over and over, from the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own, and it says, disarm, disarm. When I hear her words, I hear both a fierceness and a vulnerability in that plea, an impossibility even, a heartbreak. And while I know she's talking about a much bigger context of her moment in time, I also hear a wise voice calling to me, calling to us in our own lives. How do I disarm? How do you disarm? How do we disarm? And so I'll close with two things that I am working on. Language. How do I disarm my language? Ever since I taught that course for the last 15 years, I constantly will kind of catch myself. As I was writing this set, I said, how do I combat such and such? And I was like, oh, what? Look at that. Or if I catch myself, if I'm sitting with someone and I'm having a difficult time, connecting, or I feel that, I want to get combative in some way, I'll hear this voice say, kill him with kindness. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. How about shower them with kindness? I mean, there's some cool, switcheroo that happens. Your mind has to work. Why not? And I'm really into, warrior language, if you're in warrior pose and yoga, and how do you be a warrior without kind of drawing your sword? It's beautiful. There's beauty in that, and there's power and strength, right? But can I come up with something else than saying killing two birds with one stone? And Wendy Wooden actually gave me one. Releasing two doves with one gesture. And I actually, at first you're I don't have really lived experience of either one of those, but I was like, you know what? I have released a dove before, and I haven't killed a bird with one stone. Language. In fact, one of the Fountain Club leaders a few months ago invited youth to come in, or some college students to come in and work with our high schoolers on different forms of nonviolent communication, even going beyond language. And the other thing I do is I look for innate wisdom. Yes, we acquire wisdom over the course of our lives, but I also think that it's there, and it's especially there in some of the youngest among us. We just kind of need to support them in finding some language and tools to embody it. And so I find that if I spend time with the youngest among us and the oldest among us, my capacity for disarmament tends to increase. I think sometimes in the middle of life, we just get some distance from that. Yeah? Right? How do we disarm our ego? How do we lay it down? The innate wisdom of our human bodies and the innate wisdom of our earth body. I look to those as well. So my invitation to you, to me, to us, no matter one's practice or status or emotions or even viewpoints or rituals on this Mother's Day, is how might we listen for wisdom and honor how she may be manifesting in our lives? Right? Where's wisdom winking at you, nudging you forward, holding your hand, or being the eyes of love that gaze this day? Who is embodying wisdom with whom you can walk on this quest, or who can lead you on such a quest? The wisdom teachers of ages past, when responding to the question, well, what is the beginning of wisdom and what is the culmination of wisdom? The answer is often the same. It begins and ends in asking a question, in humility that we don't know the answer, but that we'll take a step in hope. They say that wisdom begins in that kind of curiosity, in that kind of inquiry, in wonder. Amen.